Today on the Sports Medicine Orthopod, we welcome John Doc Bodnar, aka the Supercross Doc. Doc Bodnar is the founding father of trackside medical care for Supercross and Motocross and serves as medical director for both racing series. He's been at this for 25 some odd years, first starting as a volunteer and seeing this evolve to the point where he now runs the Alpinestars Mobile Medical Unit, which racing fans will recognize as the gigantic rig parked trackside at every race. He's got a tremendous story. He's full of wisdom. Enjoy the interview. Doc, we're happy to have you. We're thrilled to hear your story. How you doing?
Pretty good. I appreciate you having me on the show. Something that's been going on for a long time. So as we talked about before, it's been routine for us, and we've been doing it for so long now. It's almost got a habit, but it's been a lifelong kind of endeavor, and we're more than happy to help out everybody at the races. And it's just been a good joy to do this stuff.
Yeah, so you're from Southern California, from the San Diego area originally, correct?
Correct. Pretty much San Diego native, Navy brat when
Yeah.
I was younger, but we were always here, and so I do call it home.
And before your career in medicine, you actually were a off-road bike racer yourself. Is that correct?
Right, I used to race the high desert of California. So I initially started a few motocross races. Racing wasn't that great, but also it was a couple motos, and I like racing all day long. So I ended up racing in the Southern and Mid California desert for about 10 years before I went
Yeah.
to med school. So Barstow to Vegas races, that kind of stuff. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
really a lot of fun. Saw a lot of country in a
Yeah,
single day.
I bet. So how did this connection with becoming the motocross, supercross doctor, how did that come about?
Well, it was one of those things where just because of friends I knew from racing and stuff, I got to be a flagger, and that was like, hey, I can get to go to the Supercross races, San Diego, Anaheim, Vegas, and be a flagger there, and get to hang out and have a good seat. You're right there on the track. So for us, it was a lot of
Sure.
fun to do the races. And basically, once I went to med school, in the back of my mind, it was something that I kind of knew they had, ambulance service there for every race, but it wasn't the same people every week. It's wherever you are in what city you're in, and so it was something when I got out of med school, I decided I could help them out at the tracks, at least locally. And luckily for me, I was resident for ER residency at UC Irvine, which is literally 3 blocks from the Anaheim Stadium. So
Yeah.
got to meet a lot of the people there and said, hey, I'd be glad to help out and volunteer and kind of help out with the medical staff that are there at each race, and kind of started from there, just running around with a bag and helping out.
What was the medical care like at that time? We're talking, early mid 90s. Is that about the era?
Yeah, mid 90s, and that was at that time. Every stadium race per se, they would have the local ambulances for the who was contracted for the stadium, and there'd be paramedics and EMTs. But it's just whoever's there for that event, and when they would take a rider off, you wouldn't know where they went. You wouldn't know, what happened to them. There's no follow up, and so they would, do a good job of taking care of them. But a lot of times, the riders would have kind of lingering injuries, things that they didn't know if they needed to go into the hospital, and other guys they don't want to go to the hospital because it's
Sure.
like
Yeah.
you always it's akin to rodeo guys. I see shows about rodeo riders, and they're the same kind of demeanor that they don't want to stop what they're doing, and an injury is just sort of a side effect, and it's a nuisance, and they're going to do everything to keep back to doing what they love. So with this, it's something we could be a week to week type of thing with all the riders, and we get to know them and know their injuries and be able to help them from, lingering stuff versus things that might put them out. And at the same time, be there for if there's something severe versus something really simple, we can give them some advice.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that at some of these races, there might not be anybody. So you're kind of becoming a familiar face. What was the response as, you're probably showing up week after week and getting to know these people and, developing friendships that aside from the ones you already had going into it?
Right. I thought for me, I mean, I guess personality wise, we seemed to get along with everybody, and the
Yeah.
group being there with the crew that was already at the races and people that I kind of had known a little bit, but through my contacts. But it I think they understood that we were there to help. I was the we is me, I guess, but
Yeah.
uh, as it starts now, it's a we. But the whole idea was just it's a really great sport, and it's a family sport as well as just one of those things that you don't want someone to not be able to race, and anything you do to help them out. So I think they understood that, and I'm sure in the beginning there was a little like, well, what's he going to do? Tell me I can't race, or
Sure.
that type of thing. And but as the years went on, it was pretty accepted. And eventually moved to where my idea was to help out all the time, and obviously I was volunteering for a long time, and
Right.
eventually we got started with Feld Motorsports was at that time, and they were like, hey, we can help you out to get you some of the races, and then they found a sponsor for us for me, and that was kind of the thing that got it really rolling, because at that time it was just really just helping out, and I can only do so much on my own dime, and also my schedule too. So
Sure.
as it worked out, things started moving, and I had a kind of thought in my mind, but I didn't know who to go to as far as trying to get support right off the bat. Wasn't much of an entrepreneur kind of guy, but eventually it started rolling, and within the industry, and that's when Astros started out, and they became the first main sponsor, and this has
Gotcha.
rolled up through there, and now it's Alpine Star, and we just keep moving it up and up and up, and getting better all the time. It's just been a great labor of love, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it bears mentioning, and I didn't mention in the intro, but you have a quote unquote day job, although I think you work a lot of evening shifts in the ER. You're an ER physician by training. So this is an offshoot of that, something else you do, as part of your career.
Right. Well, I've been a full-time ER doc for 25 years, and
Yeah.
basically working Monday through Friday morning, and getting on a plane Friday morning after I get off my night shift, and fly to a track, and come home Sunday and go back to work on Monday. And basically did that for almost a solid 20 years. And lately I've been trying to slowing to retirement, at least for my ER
Yeah.
job. So, but that, with the ER part of it, and writing, and knowing, sports and sports injuries, and what these guys have to go through to get where they are, it really helped out. I think my sports medicine has just been learning it by doing it, more than
Yeah.
anything. And over the years, especially motocross, you get a good idea of what these guys go through. And even in medicine, you look at just how different injuries happen, and the mechanism behind it. So what really helps is I know how these guys land, I know how they crash, I know what the things to look for. So it's really helped to kind of steer these guys to keep motivated and keep riding. And although they really need the motivation, really, but they,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
anything you do to make it better, and the family. I mean, this is a family sport. I mean, they're families. Some of these kids are riding since they're 5 years old, and trying to
Yeah.
get sponsored practically. And so this was things that the families, alongside the wives, the moms and dads, are at the races, especially when they're new and upcomers. And so it's a great kind of job to have. As far as in your real job, you see a patient in the ER, you don't see him again,
Sure.
maybe
Yeah.
next year for something else, but it's an ongoing benefit to be able to take care of them all the time.
Yeah. You hope you don't see them in the ER again. The ones who
And
are
yeah, ER,
the
well,
frequent
we did that.
flyers. You.
That's
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, they use that term a lot. But I mean, people need help, and that's, I mean, and there's times I've got patients that come in for different things, and it's just bad luck sometimes, and you get to
Yeah.
know the same people. But in this sport, you definitely know everybody. You know the family, the whole, from the trainers to the team managers, and that type of thing. And a lot of
Right.
team managers now are guys that I was taking care of as riders, 15 years ago, and now they're up there
Yeah.
running the team. So it's a big circle, circle of
Yeah.
life,
Very
as
cool.
they say.
Circle of life. Exactly. Yeah. So for our audience members who are not as familiar with, off road motorcycle racing, break this down for us. So what's the difference between Supercross and motocross?
Well, Supercross kind of been the offshoot of original motocross, and motocross itself was started years ago, and probably way back in the late 20s, 30s, on when people started riding bikes around on
Yeah.
tracks. But it really took off in the 50s and 60s, and then by the 70s, where it was really full on, and all the tracks are basically natural terrain tracks. So it's wherever you go, if you have a rolling hill area behind your house, you'll or in a field, you'll have this nice track that follows
Yeah.
up downhill and arounds and jumps and things that are sort of more man-made. And then later in the I guess it would be late 80s. I get my years right here, but
Yeah.
Supercross came as some of the promoters got together, and there's a few that can be named, but that came up with the idea to, let's put this in a stadium. So when you're out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, watching a race, and it's dirty, and trying to get your wife to come, or your girlfriend, or your family, it's,
Sure.
if you're not into the sport, it's hard to get people. So that was one way to make it a little more popular, and we're able to bring it into a stadium where it's a little more visual, and you can go get your popcorn, or so maybe
Yeah.
not the
Absolutely.
originally not the true hardcore fans, but it's got a huge following now. And so we basically have January through May is our Supercross season, and that's where
Uh-huh.
everything is in a city with a stadium across the U.S. And then starting in May until through the rest of this till September, we'll have races that'll go all across different parts of the country, but all natural terrain. So it's all kind of rolling hills and jumps, and it's but we call it national caliber track. So they're made specifically just for this kind of racing.
And how many riders typically in one of these races at a given time?
Well, we have a 250 and a 450 class. They're four-stroke bikes. The old days they were 125 cc and a 250, and those have kind of evolved to four strokes now. And those are going across the sorry about that. My phone's
That's
ringing on
okay.
the background.
This is life.
Cut
It's
that.
real life.
Yeah, it's live, real life. But in the outdoors, there's a 40 gate drop, and that's the exciting part is when everybody's lined up 40 riders to a gate, and the gate drops,
Oh, wow.
and they all rush out into the first turn, and there's this massive funneling effect into the first turn,
Yeah.
and that's where usually a lot of chaos can happen.
Yeah.
And that's how it originally started, and that's you have to qualify for the different races and things. So the starts are one of the big things there, and it's a much bigger field. So, and then for Supercross, there's still two classes. It's basically one 250 is more of a junior class, so to speak, but they're still professional, and into the 450s, and they're 20 per gate for that race, 20 to 22.
Gotcha. Do you hold your breath a little bit at the start of each race? You're like,
Yeah, that's where we kind of
we...
like, oh yeah, I don't. I'm trying because there's so many people, there's so many chances of having
Right.
a big pile up. So unfortunately, that's kind of keep your fingers crossed behind your back, and we all like to see a nice clean start. Everybody gets out, and then the whole race begins from there, and everybody's playing
Right.
catch up to catch the guy in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And how fast are these bikes traveling at?
Well, speeds are kind of relative because they jump a lot. So there's
Uh-huh.
and even the motocross now they kind of build jumps into the terrain of the track as well. And so the speeds like 20 25 an average smaller section up to maybe 50 miles an hour before some of the jumps. But some of the jumps they will jump over three different obstacles at once, so they won't
Oh,
even land at the two in the middle, and they'll drop on the backside of the third. So they're getting a lot of air time. So they may jump 100 feet sometimes, 70 to 100-foot jump, and it's lap after lap after lap. It's amazing to watch it. They're so good at what they do, and just watching them touch and brake, the clutch, things they do just while they're in the air. It's kind of a ballet dance, and it's very
yeah.
attractive to watch, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's part of this sport that's underappreciated is that I think the assumption from maybe a casual observer might be you just get on the bike and you make it go and you just hold on, but these guys are actually high level athletes. It takes a lot of training to be able to control this bike, control your body,
Sure,
and
yeah.
also avoid disaster at every turn.
Right, and they did studies back I'm trying to remember the years, probably in the 80s somewhere. They compared the highest stamina sports as far as aerobic activity, things like that, and they tied
Mhm.
with the top one at that time, which was soccer.
Oh,
So they
really?
basically were in the top of all the other sports of any endurance, and because you're standing you're not sitting. Everybody think you sit
Sure.
all the
Yeah.
time, but you're definitely standing the whole time practically, and sitting into the turns and standing again. So can you imagine just doing lunges all day long while you're trying to ride for 30 minutes plus. It's usually
Right.
35 to 40 minutes sometimes. So it's definitely a somebody you have to be trained for this, and that's the new thing. Over the years, the training has gotten more intense, and the top riders will have their own trainers, and
Yeah.
and everybody's working to get that extra half second of lap time, the guy ahead
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. You got to get that edge. You mentioned Alpinestars. I think it was Asterisk before then. What has that sponsorship afforded you guys? I've seen your website's very cool, and it shows pictures on the
Mhm.
inside of the medical rig, which parts of it look like what I'd imagine a tour bus for a rock band would look like. Uh,
Actually, more like a miniature or a small ER, emergency room,
yeah.
basically
Oh, yeah.
inside. It's
Right. Right.
very white, clean, and which we try to keep all the time. And we staff it with myself, and we one or two doctors, counting me, and then a trainer and a nurse that work there, as well as a paramedic. That one of our guys that we have a core of 5 or 6 guys that we rotate through, as well as the nurses, and so we have the same crew all the time. So when you see that rig, it's all decked out, and it's so proud to see because it's brand new. This one is 4 years old. We had it made directly through Featherlight, and it was great to have kind of like that new car smell when you pick up a
Yeah.
new rig. It's and to be able to take it to the track every week, and with Tom Carson as our general manager, we call him, and without him we wouldn't have had this, because he's been at the forefront from almost day one when we first were able to get a rig and get an actual team together. and get on
Sure.
the road. And those are the kind of things you can't do this yourself, and there's no way that a single person's going to be able to make this work. And it was everything just kind of fell into play, and it's been great kind of progress that we can stay where we are. And like I say, we're getting into over 20-25 years now, so it's been incredible.
Yeah, I'm going to throw up the URL of your website, for the the medical rig website.
The
And yeah,
medicrig.com, yeah.
yeah, exactly. The pictures are awesome. It does look like a mobile little hospital or ER. What are the capabilities that you have there? Is it similar to the ER?
Well, pretty similar. I mean, we by default too, and I kind of learned a little bit when from the IndyCar guys, when we've contact, we do some research with them a little bit, and over the years. And when I first started, we looked at what they had. I think it was Simple Green was their big sponsor, and they had a big semi. And so the idea is you want to do as much as you can without overreaching. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
idea is not to take on too much. I mean, obviously, if someone needs to be having a CAT scan, or we'll never have a CAT scan machine. It's just not workable. But at the same time,
Yeah.
if you think somebody needs a CAT scan, they should be in the hospital getting the CAT scan, because you
Right.
don't know what's going to happen after that. So with
Sure.
that, we can do a lot of orthopedic stuff. We have Dr. Ryman, Dr. Alexander, my partners that have been working for the last 10 to 15 years, going to the weekends I can't work, and then we work together a lot of times too.
Yeah.
So between that, we have a lot of orthopedic injuries. We have a new mini C-arm X-ray that we use, as well as an ultrasound, because ultrasound is really helpful for finding emergency kind of conditions where there's internal bleeding or different things you can find. So with all those tools, we can kind of narrow it down to whether we think they need to stay, and we can take care of them there, or if it's something we need to ship off to the hospital. So we can suture, we can, I always say I probably put in more shoulders, dislocated shoulders on the track than I have in my whole career in the ER, just because
Yeah.
we get those almost every week. So
Oh, I
it's
bet.
yeah, but those are the things you really feel good about doing. So one of the things that they need something immediately, and by us being there, we can take care of something really simply, and it causes less complications. Get it in, get them out.
Yeah, there's nothing quite as satisfying as popping a shoulder back into place.
Right, yeah, that's one of the things. It's just quick and easy, and we've had a few guys try to get back on and ride, but usually they don't after that. So yeah.
So you mentioned some of the orthopedic injuries. Like, what are the common things you're seeing at the track? Extremity fractures, things of that sort.
Yeah, we can. The thing about it is fractures are relatively easy. Once you have an X-ray machine, it helps a lot too. But
Yeah, sure.
even clinically, you can kind of tell. And the main thing is whether they can get back and ride again for that day. If they can't, then we'll take care of them, cast them up, give them crutches, whatever. But being that type of sport, and it's like a bucking bronco in rodeo. You're getting thrown off, landing a certain way. Whether
Yeah,
your hand hits the ground first, or your shoulder. So the extremities are probably one of the most common things that we see, just because of the mechanisms. But
so what are some of the kinds of injuries that might send somebody to the ER that day?
well, the biggest thing are blunt trauma to the chest. If you think they could have a collapsed lung, although with ultrasound you can diagnose that at the track. But just certain things, it's more spinal injuries, and the same thing with the IndyCar and NASCAR. If they think someone's got a spine injury, or they're having just even pain to a degree, you don't want to be messing around with that. So
Sure,
neck
sure.
injury, same thing. It's you can palpate something as much. From We're obviously talking lots of sports medicine guys here on your podcast, but that's the whole idea. Is if you're not really good at it, even if you are, you still can't be sure that they don't have a broken spinal injury somewhere that you need to get checked out, and a CT, or their MRI for that matter over at the hospital is the way to go. So you
Gotcha.
kind of look at don't try to overdo things just because
Right.
it's easier, I'll get you home, whatever. But
Yeah.
and we have that argument all the time, because just like again, like rodeo, they don't want to go anywhere. But the idea is, hey, we think this is important. We're your team doctors for the day, and this is what we recommend. And the same thing with us. We have a whole kind of, so we'll segue here, I guess, into head injuries, and we follow a lot with all the latest all the information that's been out there from concussions and all the different head injury protocols that are out there. So we have a very robust program that we have now, that we can call, tell a rider he can't ride once he's been diagnosed with a concussion. It's up to us to clear him. So that'll put him in our protocol. And Dr. Ryman's actually in charge of our concussion program. And so that'll get him on, in the road to getting back to riding again, whether it takes a week and a half, 2 weeks usually. But there's a whole protocol you have to do. You can't just say, "Oh, I feel fine and I
Yeah.
rang my bell." That's
That's right.
kind of in the old days that was it. It's like a
Exactly.
boxer getting hit. I still laugh at boxing because they can get hit and get knocked down and get back up and keep
Yeah.
boxing again. So interesting. But I mean, that the whole idea is we want to prolong their career, and that's one thing I pushed for a long time is the more important, and this goes for any kind of sports medicine type of program. You want your guys to get back safely, but also as quickly as possible, but don't get more injuries. And I don't, I can't put numbers on this, but I just think over the years we probably had riders that we've had kind of sit out, convince them to sit out an extra week or so, and they come back a lot better than they would if they tried a week, ride, later in that very next week, 6 days later, they're back on the bike again and trying to race with an injury, and then they end up falling off and getting hurt again. So there's certain things, and it's all relative, but it's certain kind of injuries that you just want to watch. But if you can't hold the bucking bronco going down which basically a bike is in some ways,
Yeah.
you have to be able to hold on. And so the idea is, hey, if you know, take that extra week off and come back full force, a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, a lot better than trying to race too soon.
Yeah, that's quite an achievement because I'm sure, 30 some odd years ago when you started this, it was that old school mentality where it's like,
Sure.
I'm fine. I'm a little dizzy, but I'm fine. And so how is this met with the sort of the riders and the culture in general as you're introducing these new kind of medical protocols in the name of safety?
Right.
Is
And
there?
I think they've really, whether from Feld and MX Sports and the AMA, American Motorcycle Association, who's our sanctioning bodies, they've all been very, very good about, this is what it takes and this is what we're going to do. And to the point they even have things in the rule book now that aren't there, just so that we
Yeah.
can, tell a rider he can't ride, or if this is what's not just the prudent, but really the safest way to do this, then, and I think over the years, even the riders, like I mentioned, the riders that are now team managers down the road, and
Yeah.
they were the guys riding, probably
Sure.
after getting hit, that they've all accepted it pretty well. I mean, no one wants to not be able to ride. I mean, if a guy has a concussion, it's just like if, say, he breaks his leg. He knows a leg is different. They go, "Oh, I can't ride. I broke my leg." He's really
Yeah.
bummed. Concussion, it was a little harder to convince people, but luckily the way things have gone and with all the support we've had from everybody in the industry, it's they all understand that now, and it's only going to make the rider have a better career and not end his career too soon.
And you've used this concussion program for the basis of some research as well, right? Especially as it pertains to this particular sport.
Well, right. We're trying to work. That's the hard part, is getting the numbers. And we still are a fairly small operation, and we
Yeah.
do as much as we can to get the data together. And one of the problems too is we don't have a lot of numbers of people. So if you're looking at the whole NFL with how many teams and they have,
Right.
those kind of studies are a little more, they have a better number to pick from, the p-value as they call it, to
Yeah.
make sure that this is the numbers that you're seeing are mean something, and not just it could be just by
Sure.
happenstance or just by
Yeah.
coincidence. So
Right.
but that's what helps us, is we can look at numbers in real time and kind of go with them. So it's been a good, like I say, it's from everything we've been doing. It's every year we learn something new, and it's always an ongoing thing.
Yeah. Having done this so long, and you said you know all the riders, their families. Do you ever find yourself a little conflicted when there's a rider with an injury and they're pushing you? Come on, doc. Let me
Yeah.
get back out there. Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's the hard part. The doctor party has to win out, obviously, just because. But I mean, like I say, we know the family, we know the riders, we know, and there's guys in the points hunt for the championship, and there's
Sure.
nothing worse than somebody's, he's one or two in the championship and then he gets hurt, or he
Yeah.
gets pulled for some reason. But I think, like, over the years, it's just gotten where they understand it. But there's that other side of you, that's the racer, and then and the fan. I mean, we're fans too. We love seeing a good
Right.
race. We love seeing guys duking it out, and you know taking it right to the finish line, and checker flag stuff. So that's the hard part. It's like you just don't want them to get hurt, and at the same time you still have your fans. You have your I mean you have your favorites as a fan,
Yeah.
but we can't tell them who they are.
Exactly. You're like, I don't like this guy. He's not going back out there.
Yeah, pay me $20. Oh no, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. um, what's going through your mind when you see a bad crash out on the track?
Well, most of it, I mean, again, it's somebody, whether you know them or not, you just because half the time you can't tell who it is, even when it's nice and dirty out there. But I mean, it's sort of just like your ER job when someone comes in a car wreck.
Mhm.
You're turned on, so it's just going to hit you do your usual routine. And the main thing is just to make sure that what can we do with this guy immediately? Do we have to get him off? Do we have to transport him, or do we keep him? So
Sure.
after, like say, if you'd asked me the first year or two, I probably would say I go up there scared as can be.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? But luckily over the years you do get some
Uh,
with the experience, and with the great team I got behind me,
yeah.
it's I trust everybody, and it's so we go through the routine. It's just your usual medical kind of protocols that you would do, but at the same time there is that back and forth, and whether if you don't ride this moto, can you ride next moto? I mean, that's certain things. So we just have to work it out and decide between them and their family or the rider what the best option is for them. And like I say, a lot of times they're usually gonna ride when they can. And a lot of
Yeah.
times I've told them, probably shouldn't ride, and they'll go out and ride anyway. I figure, well, you're not gonna hurt yourself or anybody much more. I don't know how good you're gonna do today, and then they go out and win a
Sure.
moto. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, they come back and tell me, thanks, Doc, but I won anyway. So
Right. Right.
that's yeah.
um, with so many riders on the track handling these powerful machines, how chaotic can be? I mean, are there multiple injuries at once, or is it usually pretty controlled? And with your team, you guys can kind of manage everything in a sort of a calm fashion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're pretty calm about it for the most part, just because
Yeah.
the crew is we're good at what we do. I think just to not
Yeah.
pat ourselves in the back, I guess. But I mean, there's times you'll get, especially the first turn pileup, you might get five or six guys down, and you're running
Yeah.
up to each one, and they're also going to be coming around the track again after about another minute and a half. They're going to be working
Yeah.
their way around again, so you have to get them off the track, or red flags, things like that. So
Right.
yeah, there's a little pucker factor when you're trying to get everybody checked
Sure.
out immediately like that. So, but generally it's spread out enough where you'll get one or two at the same time a few times, but the
Yeah.
majority of times it's single wrecks, but they can be one right after the other, right after the other.
Yeah. Without naming any names, are there any injuries that stand out to you? Any memorable ones? We always tend to, as doctors, tend to remember like the worst cases. Are there any that you kind of think back
No,
on? Gee,
because I really don't like to talk about that stuff anyway. I mean, this is a rough sport, just like rodeo, and there's all kinds of things can happen. Car racing, you can
sure.
go back to NASCAR and IndyCar, and there's plenty
Yeah.
of bad stuff. But for the most part, everybody, they're strong, and they're just, it's amazing. You can have a femur fracture, and the guys are just kind of talking to you like, where if you
Yeah.
and I were the femur fracture, we'd be screaming and yelling how much hurt.
Absolutely.
It's amazing what these guys can go through just because they are so trained. So.
Yeah, I would be like dilauded here immediately.
Yeah.
um, how do you balance this with your ER job? You said you kind of do weekday shifts and then your weekends are reserved for races.
Pretty much, yeah. I worked it out right off the bat that I was a night shift guy anyway. I don't get up that early in the morning ever, except for race days, I guess. But yeah, so I would go and work my shifts all through the week, and then but one
Yeah,
weekend a month I'd have to work in my real ER job. So that's when I have the other docs would work a race for me in between.
yeah,
So I would work, generally probably 5 out of 6 races or 4 out of 6, something like that. So yeah, kudos to my wife Tony, who puts up with me, and she knew when I went to med school I wanted to be the motocross doc, she said, or supercross doc. She said I was already planning that while I was in med school. So it's just you work at your schedule the best you can, and but yeah, it's a hectic. You're flying a lot. You're in the airplane every weekend and
yeah,
hotels every weekend, rental cars. So that's the part you don't know, and you can't talk to anybody in the industry who doesn't say, oh, I'm tired of this darn hotels, or
yeah.
flying to the airport, kind of from the airport stuff.
So, Doc, you're saying your wife has nobody to blame but herself because she knew what she was getting into.
Yeah, I think she did. She knew right off. Yeah, even before we got married earlier, before I was in med school, so she knows the drill. She's
Uh,
been my number one supporter. Obviously, when you're married a long time, it's your soulmate, so to speak, and
yeah,
it helps out a lot that she understands. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, I wanted to talk to you about something that I see in my own practice, and that is some pretty young kids on these motorcycles. And I fixed a number of them with pretty mangled extremities, multi-ligamentous knee injuries, things of that sort. I think from an outsider's perspective, especially after hearing what you said, a lot of riders on the track at one time, trying to navigate and control these high-powered machines. do you think it's too much for young kids, or you said they start very young? They're probably pretty accomplished by the time they're, even a teenager, if they've been doing it the right
Sure.
way and taught the right way. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, kind of look at there's so many good things about the sport. I mean, any kind of, whether your kid's playing football, he's playing soccer, even baseball. There's all those sports that kids do when they're young and they go through school, high school, and grade school. They're going to be injuries. It's just you can't do
Yeah.
something at a high speed like that. And even soccer. I mean, I'm sure you
Oh
probably have
yeah.
more ACL tears in
Ton.
soccer than probably anything.
Yeah.
So, and that for a while that was a big thing. I think we don't see as quite as many just because of the knee braces and the
Yeah.
protective gear that they wear. But the other part people don't understand is it's such a family effort that these kids don't get in trouble very often. I mean, back in
Yeah.
the day, we used to have a party after a race, or something, but it's just not. It's you have to have your head on to do this kind of stuff. And the family's all supported behind you, so they're not out getting loaded somewhere or getting drunk every night. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's different things kids can get into, and some can cause a lot of trouble. And when you're racing, and if this is what you really like, I have a couple of people I know that their kids are into it at a real young age, and boy, that
Yeah.
kid's he's on it. He's a very respectful kid. He's knows he wants to race, and he knows what he needs to do. So the part of the whole family thing that makes this a good dynamic is probably outweighs any downside. And
Sure.
again, your chance of being at the top are probably like any other sport. You may not be a professional, but when you get done with it all, you'll have a good understanding of what made you a man, so to speak, or made you a woman
Yeah.
for that matter. We have women racers too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff comes out of it, and I definitely think it outweighs anything on the bad.
Yeah. And you mentioned it before that some of the sort of the young folks that you used to care for at the track are now managers. This is really a youth-oriented sport. You were telling me prior to the show that the longevity, uh, it, typically before, was not much past mid-20s or so. Now it's a little bit longer.
Right,
Um,
right. It's it's surprising. It's yeah. It seemed like it'd be early 50, early 20s, and they'd be pretty much going away and
yeah.
kind of disappear, kind of just lose that edge or whatever. They got them to the podium as much, and
Right.
so it's just amazing how many of the guys are staying into their early 30s, surprisingly, and they're still up there, very competitive. So I don't know if it's just the equipment's better or just the training helps or
Sure.
and I think too mentally they take it differently once they reach a certain age. They know how to pace themselves a little better maybe.
Uh-huh. How did COVID affect you guys?
It was tough. I remember we were at Daytona was our last race in 2000 when that was I think in March, and things had started kind of hitting the head. Then that's when we realized something was up, and all the
Yeah.
borders started getting shut. So we were shut down for about 2 months and completely. And then they were able to come up with a plan to. We think we were short 7 races out of the 17, I think, to finish the series, and
Yeah.
so it helped to get these guys back out there and for sponsors and promoters and things like that. It's people needed to do their job, so to speak. So we were able to, with Feld, arrange to have all the races in Salt Lake City. So we had the last 7 races in three and a half weeks in Salt Lake City to an empty stadium, to no
Yeah.
fans. It was really very unusual, kind of strange. All the pits were isolated. So I mean, all the each team. So you say the Yamaha factory team or the Honda team or some of the small teams. Everybody's team had to stay isolated from the other team. So everybody was sort of in their own
Oh.
little pod. And
Yeah.
we were about this from the medical. The only ones that actually see people from different groups. At least when they're on the track.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a challenge, but it actually went off really well. I was real impressed that there's a lot of work involved in that. Just from the medical side alone, just getting all that
Sure.
stuff in the testing, already had to be tested every week, and it was. But hats off to them. They Feld in MX Sports, same thing. When we got the outdoors, they all came together and made it work,
Yeah.
and so we were back out there racing. It was really
Yeah.
pleasant.
Did the racers express to you that this is a little odd with no fans, or is it just kind of like this is still racing and
Well, no, I mean we all talked about it. I mean, you talk to
yeah,
guys, as you're walking by and things, it's like, wow, this is strange. We're on the track, it's
yeah,
weird. This empty stadium, the announcers
right,
are still talking like there's a bunch of people in the stands, even though
Yeah.
it's empty. And it was different, but everybody really just took it on and said, hey, we're going to make this work. And so
Yeah.
got in there and did it. I'm sure the rest of the sports groups are doing the same thing. So, but
Sure.
we were
Sure.
one of the first, I think, to get out there and actually have an event that they could actually promote and put on TV, back on TV and stuff pretty
Right.
quickly, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking back at where you started to where you are now, this evolution, you went from just showing up as a volunteer and now you've got this sophisticated system with the whole team. Where does it go from here, do you think?
Well, I guess we got a beast that has to be fed. So we're like any other sport, we got to keep our group going. So I'm not getting any younger. Actually, I'm retiring from ER pretty soon. So, but not from racing. I'll still do that till I have to
Yeah.
point things out on track and have somebody running around for me. But the idea is just keep, this is something that's, it's a passion for us and it'll always be that way. So we've got a lot of people coming up from behind. I've got 3 or 4 guys who are just finishing residencies right now and a couple
Oh
more
yeah.
guys in med school that, have volunteered with us to get a feel of what it's like on the track. And
Right.
so that we can, have people that'll be taking over when I'm too old to do
Yeah.
it again and keep this thing going for as long as forever would be a great thing.
Well, Doc, thanks so much for joining us. Really enjoyed listening to your story and hearing your insights. Let's finish up with 5 questions with Doc Bodnar.
All right.
So, number 1, you are a Southern California native. Hodads or In-N-Out?
Or I missed, like, you cut off at the second one.
Oh, okay. In-N-Out or Hodads?
Oh, In-N-Out.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I only lived in San Diego for a year, and so I didn't know how popular this Hodads thing was, but it's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
good, I
not
thought.
that popular. Yeah,
No, it's not that
uh,
popular. They had it at the Padres Stadium, so I'm like, oh, this must
oh,
be
there we go. Yeah.
this, yeah. All right. Question number 2. More intense atmosphere, the emergency room or trackside coverage?
That's a good one. I think trackside coverage because there's always something going on. ER is too, but there are lull times. You're still busy, but it's sort of
Yeah.
more routine after a while. So trackside, there's all kinds of things can happen. From the moment
Yeah.
the guy's one turn from the end of the race, and he can crash or somebody crashes into
Right.
him. So it's definitely more intense there.
What do you do if somebody crashes on a race? You run out there
Well,
or
yeah, I mean the whole idea is it's a coordinated ballet, so to speak. We don't just and we also have say the medics from the local paramedic group there. The ambulance
yeah.
company will be there, and we utilize them as well. But our team are usually the first ones on the track, so it's not blindly run out there. So you give the
Right.
guys time to get up. I mean, obviously, if they're
Yeah.
not getting up, we're gonna get there in pretty quickly. But it's one of those sports you'd be amazed how fast you think somebody's definitely going to be out of the race, and before you can get over to them, they've jumped on the bike and taken off again. So
Oh yeah.
so you have to. It's a really it's not like medicine you do anywhere else. Definitely not like hospital medicine. There's nothing in certain ways that compared to ER, just because of that they can get up and get going. But you just learn to do something more. I don't know. Your skills get highly tuned just from that alone. You can use that in your real job too in the emergency
Sure.
rooms. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of you assess things differently.
Yeah, I'm sure these 2 different jobs, they are related in terms of your expertise, but I'm sure you've learned things that you've applied to your ER job and vice versa, taking skills from the ER to the track, and it's
Definitely, definitely.
probably a nice balance.
Yeah, it sure
Um,
is.
yeah, I was going to say the difference about the ER is when you're going to talk to somebody in the ER, you're not about to get hit by a high velocity motorcycle speeding right towards you.
Well,
So,
true. Yeah, you have to watch that. And, yeah, the environment changes a little bit from that perspective. That's for sure. But and it's different because it's happening immediately. And even for ER docs, they don't see patients till they've already been picked up by the ambulance and taken over
sure.
to them. So it might be a
Yeah.
half hour, 45 minutes
Right.
from the time of the action. You're seeing some of the
Yeah.
minute they got hurt. So there's things you learn that you see, in certain scenarios. And so
Yeah.
you see a patient that comes in, you go, oh, that looks might be
Right.
something going on there. So
Yeah.
it's
This
all helpful.
is an acute as an acute injury can get.
Exactly.
Okay. So, question number 3. You've traveled the world covering these races, providing medical care. What's your favorite race location?
Favorite. I don't want to say that, then I get the people that I don't mention might not like it.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
there's
you do a few top three.
well, I mean, there's the East Coast, the Midwest and the Eastern area. They're so green and so lush. And being from California, where everything is kind of a little dry, especially right around
Yeah,
now, and all
sure.
the fires, unfortunately. But yeah, there's some. The Martins have a really good track at it's called Spring Creek in Minnesota, and I've kind of med school stopping at their place, so I've known them since day one. So that
Yeah,
has a good place in my heart. But every track has there's and they've all gotten all they just constantly upgrading what they do there. It's just whether it's facilities or getting in getting out. Just it's and the promoters for each track they're just great people too. So
yeah,
yeah, it's hard to really pick a complete one, but they're so pretty. It's just the scenery is beautiful and the
sure.
people are great. Can't can't
Yeah,
can't can't do any better than that.
yeah. Very cool. Okay, question number 4. You were once a racer. You still ride to this day. Watching all of the races you do you ever think, let me just put my stethoscope down and grab one of these helmets and see what I can do on this track?
Yeah, I don't race anymore just because I get too intense and and
Oh,
then I
really?
ride over, well, because once you ride, you race, you want to win, right? So
Yeah,
even with
sure.
my buddies, you're always trying to catch the guy ahead of you, and so then you
Right.
start riding over your head. So for us, I still go to the motocross tracks a lot, just play ride and ride around, have fun. And to
Yeah.
me, it's just what obstacle can I keep doing safely without getting hurt? Because unfortunately, if you go out right over your head a little bit, you're gonna get bit.
Yeah. I can see it now. The movie version of this will be you have to replace an injured rider. And as you're
Oh
crossing the
yeah,
finish
yeah,
line,
right, yeah.
everybody's like, who is that? I'm like,
Yeah.
that's Doc Bodnar.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen anytime. Riders know me well enough to know that they don't have anything to worry about from me. That's for sure.
That's Doc. Everybody cries. Fade to black. Roll the credits. I can see it now. Okay. Last final question for Doc Bodnar. We mentioned about kids getting into this at a young age. Parents who might be listening to this, whose kids are tugging at them, saying, "Let me get on one of these bikes." What advice do you have for the parents whose child might be interested in getting into motocross or supercross riding?
It's kind of like any other like baseball and little league dads you hear about, those kind of names
Yeah.
it seems as long as you can bond with your child. I mean that's the whole point of this is your child wants to do it. Don't force him if he doesn't want to do it. And a lot of riders don't want their kids to be racing. They say it's
Yeah.
just too hard or whatever.
Sure.
But it just the parents that know their child know how they are and can support them. I mean, and it's a support type thing. You're not gonna. It's not just a weekend go out and do stuff and then it's a
Yeah.
Monday through Friday or Monday through Sunday kind of thing, and
Yeah.
it's going to take a lot of your effort and a lot of time. So if your child is really into it and you feel like this is something that if you know enough about that you can help them, or the people that can, then to me it's all worth it. And
Right.
times when it's say no. I mean, if the kid has if he can't walk straight and without falling down, like man, maybe you might pick a different sport. But I mean, if
Yeah.
he shows aptitude and you guys have that family bond that you can do this kind of stuff, then there's a lot of other sports that I think would take second place to this one.
Sure. Sure. All right, Doc. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Special
Pleasure.
shout out to our mutual friend Josh Ratty, one of my colleagues from Chicago, who's now in Hawaii, for setting this up.
Yeah, he's one
Really
of my
enjoyed the
guys helps
story.
out at the track with us, so I'm glad to have him around too. So
Yeah, yeah. He really talked you up, and you certainly delivered. It was a great story. Thanks so much for sharing for us.
glad to help
Um,
out. Appreciate it. And I
all right.
appreciate this all the sports guys out there. I mean, this is sports is universal. I mean, there's the Olympics are going on now, and all those people are
Yeah.
doing that same kind of thing. So we all have our little niches of what we can do to help out. And so once you find it, pick something you love to do and jump in there and do it. Because as docs too, it's one of those things. You want to help people out, and you can't always do it the way you want sometimes. So go out and find a kind of sport you can jump into and help out, and you'll have a good time.
Absolutely. And especially during this time of COVID-19, I think we all have recognized how important sports are, how much we may have taken it for granted in the past, and not just physically, but socially and mentally as well. As we've
Oh, sure.
seen many of our top athletes deal with emotional stress that is related, in some part at least, to the pandemic and the inability to be the athlete that you identify yourself to be. So, um, uh, motocross, supercross, great sport. There's a lot of great sports out there. And like you said, I think doing it for the right reasons, doing it the right way, having the support, whatever sport you're going into, that's important for life.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Doc. Thanks so much.
Glad to
See you
help
next
out.
time. All right.
All right.
Take care.
Keep on sporting.
All right. Folks, thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, please subscribe, like, and share. And we love to hear from you. If you have a question about today's show, or you, a loved one, or maybe your favorite athlete has sustained a sports medicine injury that you would like to know more about, please reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or email. And stay tuned for more exciting content from the Sports Medicine Orthopod. Thanks again.